I left my job without notice after realizing they never put my promised bonus in writing, instead giving it to an intern. Here is a narrative regarding the initial job I held approximately 10 years ago. A brief summary is included at the conclusion. Disclaimer: there will be some ambiguity moving forward, as both the organization and I exhibited some dreadful behavior, which ultimately led to disastrous results for everyone involved, all under the guise of retribution. Typos, grammar, I apologize for the errors, but they will be addressed eventually, so please bear with me. The essential points are conveyed for now. I was a novice yet qualified addition to a small team that collaborated with a significant client and stakeholder within the organization. Although I possessed skills, this was my first official employment right after graduating, so I was not well versed in office dynamics, contractual obligations, power structures, etc. The clients assigned us a nearly unfeasible task to develop a prototype for a complicated solution to a technical issue they were experiencing. As the sole team member with the pertinent knowledge, the responsibility swiftly rested on my shoulders to accomplish the task independently, while my colleagues primarily took on managerial roles. At the onset, the team leader and my direct supervisor assured me that I would receive a bonus equivalent to approximately 30% of my base salary. Supposedly, this bonus was a direct financial input from the major clients, and plans were underway to secure these additional funds. Fantastic, except it was not documented. However, over the subsequent 2 years, this promised bonus never materialized. Periodically, and with little enthusiasm, I inquired about it during face-to-face meetings, and I received verbal assurances that it was forthcoming. In retrospect, I wish I had been more assertive and perhaps sent an email, but as a newcomer, I was hesitant to challenge the authority of those who employed me. As the 2 years passed, the organization began to broaden its business relationship with the client due to my contributions to the challenging project. At one point, the clients even showcased my extensive work at international conferences, of course claiming it as their intellectual property and a proprietary solution. While the project ownership rightfully belonged to them, the absence of acknowledgement left a sour taste in my mouth. And even more disheartening was observing the financial resources circulating while both companies benefited from my 2 years of dedicated labor, yet the bonus remained elusive. By the 3rd year, my employment contract was approaching its conclusion. Naturally, the company aimed to keep me engaged in the project, as I was the only one knowledgeable about its details. It would be a joint venture between the organization and the client, as I would be responsible for transitioning the project. This would demand several more years of work. Additionally, I underwent half a year of specialized training with the clients, only I would be able to execute this job for the foreseeable future. In exchange, I was offered a reasonable salary increase, but the lack of the promised bonus had undermined my trust. During a contract negotiation meeting, I broached the topic one final time. The team leader and my supervisor claimed they had no memory of such an agreement and emphasized the importance of having it documented. Fair point. Some lessons are learned the hard way. Yet, the most disheartening realization was that the anticipated bonus, a meager 30% of my new salary for nearly 3 years, was now designated for an intern who would join me on the project. The financial contributions were essentially reallocated from my intended bonus to sponsor the new hire. As my work contract neared its expiration, the Human Resources Department asked me to review the document prior to signing. Given the substantial time, resources, training, and commitment that had been invested in my continued participation in the project, and my genuine enthusiasm for it, it was presumed that I would be present for the long term, and that signing the contract was merely a formality. What transpired next is something I would not recommend for anyone to replicate at home or in the workplace. It was an impulsive decision driven by youthful recklessness. However, I felt particularly vindictive regarding the missing bonus. My ego had taken a hit because I had foolishly placed my trust in them to fulfill their promises, yet I had not been astute enough to obtain any written confirmation. Well, turns out there was also no written agreement on my part. At that moment, I had not signed the contract. I meticulously reviewed my emails and found no documentation indicating my agreement to continue with this project, or even to maintain my employment. In fact, I had only expressed verbal enthusiasm about the project during discussions with my supervisor and the clients. The first new work day arrived when I officially ceased to be employed by the organization or the clients. I provided no notice or warnings. I simply walked away. The day before, I had left my company-issued pager and phone in the office locker. I sacrificed a few personal belongings from my desk. I logged out of the work email and messaging systems to ensure they could not contact me. I am unsure how they reacted since I ignored and deflected every communication that came my way in the following months. It was a blissful experience, knowing that I likely caused the company a substantial crisis for at least the next few years. Of course, I could not have anticipated the repercussions they would encounter from my abrupt and unannounced departure. However, I did not have the inclination to care about their situation. I needed to prioritize myself, tap into my savings, and relocate to begin anew in a distant city, which posed considerable challenges without professional references due to the bridge I had just burned. Hence the warning against this behavior. But eventually, my skills began to validate themselves. The last I heard regarding the company was from a former colleague when we reconnected on an online professional platform some years later. Allegedly, the company still operates, but it has become a mere shadow of its former self as things deteriorated significantly after my exit. They lost the prominent client, just as I had predicted. No one else possessed the skills to manage the project. The clients still play a role in their industry, but I have been fortunate enough to avoid interactions with them thus far. However, I could not foresee the chain reaction that would follow within the organization. A few additional major clients departed shortly thereafter because staff had to be reassigned to my project, and these other clients felt overlooked. Now, the company is downsizing and facing the prospect of being absorbed by a competitor. From what I have gathered, another major casualty of this situation was my former boss, who developed a substance abuse issue around this time as a means to cope with the stress partly triggered by the difficulty of not being able to contact me for months during a critical phase in the company's growth. There was also a divorce, as this professional strain ultimately destroyed their marriage. I admit to feeling a hint of guilt when my former colleague recounted all of this, and I still do. Is it sufficient for me to right my wrongs and extend an apology or something similar? Not necessarily. However, perhaps I am mistaken in this view. I remain open to suggestions. Note this former supervisor attempted to reach out to me several times in the years following the downturn, but I was too occupied, so I continued with my strategy of avoiding contact. But nonetheless, here's to Dumbass, Inc. I hope it was worth the meager bonus I was owed. I entered the company as a fresh recruit and was thrust into a leadership position on the project from day one. I had to invest considerable effort and acquire new skills outside of work so that the affluent clients and middle management could enjoy the benefits, not under my vengeful watch. The motivation behind this account is to find a therapeutic release. Both the company and I engaged in reprehensible actions. Nevertheless, the absence of that bonus continues to gnaw at me from time to time. I could have purchased a home and settled down in that old town. I would not have been dislocated for months, managing to keep my head above water, only to have to rebuild my life for a few years afterward. Walking away from the project and my job was, without a doubt, professional suicide at that moment. Yet my desire for vengeance was such that, regardless of what occurred, I would navigate my life without ever having to grovel back to that company. Of course, this egotistical behavior of mine, stemming from the resentment of not receiving that bonus, still has at least one unwritten chapter. In my current workplace, where I am also a stakeholder, I am now proposing a renewed version of that old project I initiated a decade ago and never managed to complete. It would be gratifying to present a patent at an international conference attended by those former significant clients. That would constitute the real bonus. So, yes, mistakes were made on all sides, leading to an at best mixed outcome for all involved. R pro-revenge by R pro-suicide, I suppose. But at least it feels good to finally put this in writing. TLDR, the company does not provide me with a bonus because there was no written agreement. I abruptly leave them midway through the project because my future employment was also not documented. I continue to ignore them for weeks, months, years following this pivotal moment and move on in life purely out of spite, which ultimately plays a significant role in causing the business to fail a decade later.